Okay, and next up we have Olena. So I think Olena's here. So she can start to switch on her camera and microphone while I'm introducing her. And she says that in her capacity as a university lecturer, she's been using Terry Pratchett's fiction as part of her classes for more than a decade. The purpose of her talk is to share her experience and show how students can benefit from working with Pratchett's texts. She's been employing these texts in the following ways: as parts of English language classes for undergraduates majoring in philology, as challenging texts for translation during translation classes, as examples supporting theoretical points during lectures, and as material for students' academic research. The relevance of using Pratchett's work when working with future philologists stems from the exceptional linguistic variety of his novels and his unique sense of humour. Olena tells us that she's been using these texts as illustrations of elaborate poems, metaphors, similes, periphrasis, I'm not good at saying that word, euphemisms, etc., when lecturing on different theories and types of humour, as well as when teaching classes on stylistics and literary studies. The Britishness of Pratchett's fiction, reflected in numerous allusions, references, and the use of regional and societal dialects, etc., presents a fruitful field for applying different translational strategies. And I'm going to stop the bio there because...
Thank you, James. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I'm just going to share.
Great. I thought I was going to say all the words, to force and so forth. Nothing much left for me to say. Okay, so this is a very different experience for me now, because usually when I speak conferences is this, I speak about Terry Pratchett's work from academic perspective. But I've decided, well, everybody at this conference obviously will be familiar with Terry Pratchett's work, and I can speak about a different topic, about how I've been using this in my classes. So hopefully that will be interesting for you. Okay, so which university is this? This is Kyiv National Linguistic University. I'm teaching here is, and as James voiced, for more than a decade using Terry Pratchett's work in a very different ways. Okay, I hope you can see my presentation. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the three big groups: students, academic research, a little bit about that, a lot about using Terry Pratchett text in my English language classes for philology students. Why? Because that's most of the work that I teach English to philology students. And also a little about translation studies. So let's do that. So, okay. Sorry. Students' academic research. Here, okay. There's a problem with my audio. I'm reading in the comments. Okay, yes, the problem in my audio. I wonder what I can do about it. Not just. Okay, is it better now for you? Okay, I'll say something and please type if you can hear me better now. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'll continue. I work at the chair of English Philology, Translation and Philosophy of Language. And one of the major perspectives that we use is cognitive linguistics. So I've offered my students to look at Terry Pratchett's work, not only from very traditional ways, like looking at linguistic and stylistic aspects of his work, but also from some cutting-edge terminology and methodology points like cognitive linguistics, multimodality, and intermediality. For example, okay, So this is one of diploma papers that my student, I supervised her work, Olga Kadryan, Conceptual Domain Land in Terry Pratchett's Making series, Semantic, Cognitive, and Cultural Aspects. Land, as you remember the chalk in Tiffany Aiken series, is a huge character, it's a huge presence, and it's reflected in the language a lot. So the work focused on that. And Martin did a really great job researching that. She entered into the competition of student thesis and she got the first prize, so it was fantastic. And from what I've heard today, especially Wendy's talk today, I think I will also offer my students to focus some of their research on fandoms, maybe on fanfic, on the ways readers interact with text, as long as it can be studied from linguistic perspectives, and of course it can, we can be interested in that research. Okay, my main point is how I use, how I use Terry Pratchett text in English with my English philology students. So of course, Terry Pratchett texts offer a huge amount of linguistic and so on and so forth. So anything you want to focus on, metaphors, memes, and so on, periphrases, whatever, it's all there for you. Whatever you want to underpin, you will find. But more importantly, there's been a lot of a stereotype. I don't know about you guys, but for some reason, philology students tend to be female, talking about feminism and all that. There is a kind of stereotype that math is for boys, languages are for girls. I don't know why this is happening. So I have like 85% of my students, they're female, that they have their own stereotypes about what they read and what they don't. And it turns out that they don't read fantasy and science. I don't know why. And they say this when I offer them, when I don't offer, I say that in this class we're going to read the fantasy, and they say, well, I don't read fantasy. Why? I don't like it. Have you tried? Well, know that I won't like it, and I say, okay, well, step out of your comfort zone and you'll read. When you've done reading this, to have your perspective on this. As to critical thinking and developing critical thinking, I believe very important part of education, no matter what it is that you actually teach. So when we teach, for example, linguistic, stylistic peculiarities of texts, in that case, you can focus not only on what is said, but how it is said. And here, Terry Pratchett becomes very helpful with quotes. For example, so Stebbins gave up using a metaphor in front of a man as unimaginative as Rickley was like a rat. Was like putting something very annoying in front of someone who was very annoyed by it. So here we are. Here you can see the author draws the attention to the character and also to the language used to describe that character. It's much better than giving definitions of what metaphors are or similes are. You can show how they actually. So we've read several novels, my students. These are some of the rides and moving pictures. These are easier paths to follow. Why is that? Because here you have a stories, and as to their referential fields, they are based on something students are familiar with and are ready to discuss, such issues as feminism, and civil rights and equal rights, and of course Hollywood and everything that is related to cinema in moving pictures. But you can go for more complicated choices. This is what I've tried with this in Hawkfather. Why is this more difficult? So Weird Sisters might be very complicated for students to read because it's based so much on Shakespearean language. And of course, in our country, students study Shakespeare, but they tend to read Shakespeare in translation. And the Weird Sisters, in order to appreciate numerous puns and flamboyant use of language that Terry Pratchett employs, you need to be aware of how Shakespeare actually sounds in English. And it boosts students' awareness and understanding of what it is actually to be a philologist majoring in English. Hawkfather is complex. We've had amazing talks, for example, all over yesterday, and today included Hawkfather in their presentations, dwelling on its philosophic depth. And for this reason, it is indeed a very difficult book to discuss, but you can kind of smooth into it. You can students, offering them such topics as Christmas and seasonal holidays, how they are celebrated, and so on and so forth. And they just don't know when you're heading with this. They are very happy to discuss these topics. And then you get more complicated for them. So you offer them a question like this. So you tell them, with dealing with Christmas story, Terry Pratchett deconstructs it and reassembles it again. And in this, the process of this, studies is the message, and he offers the ultimate message of this, as well as many deep philosophical issues that are there. So I posed this question before they start reading, and in the end we get back to it and we see what they've learned and what they've discovered. Talking about metaphors once again, so there is a tendency when philology is taught that people, teachers, students focus on expressive means and devices. For example, they would say, oh, I found a metaphor in the text, and during exams you would hear there are a lot of metaphors in this text. And I think the problem is that they're kind of missing the point. So why are they there? So once again, with books like Hawkfather, any book by Terry Pratchett, you can redefine this. You can redefine this completely. Instead of focusing on metaphors, for example, you might be focusing on something else, like on mental processes, because his books are so rich. And if you look at Hawkfather, there are characters who are different in the ways they think. That would be a lot of them, but mostly these two you see on the screen. For example, there's a quote about the way Mr. Timer's mind worked. And here you can see a simile for a reason, because the way he thinks defines him. As to different projects that people that can do during classes, there's a huge variety. There's a lot you can do. And once again, you can shift. Please look at the last one here on the list, hat-shaped metonymies. So that will be once again talking about a stylistic saying metonymy, but the focus will be shifted. Here, students will focus on hats, and Terry provides so many examples of hats in this, and they all something. They are metonyms, metaphors, symbols. There's a lot that can be said about it. So I'll move on to translation now. For 2 years now, of theory and practice of translation. Of course, this presupposes discussing theoretical points such as, for example, equivalency, what it is, how it can be achieved from different standpoints, and discussing a number of translation strategies that can be applied. Here, I engage Terry Pratchett's Neil Gaiman's work as a case study. So I take for this Good Omens. I've been using for several reasons. First of all, I find it extremely entertaining, and ever since the series came out, also very popular. 2020, well, the apocalyptic year sounds so topical. So as to Good Omens, we have a translation Ukrainian, and also, as we heard yesterday, there's a kind of a situation in Ukraine that people might grab Russian before they even think what they're doing because they're used to this. These Russian translations are available, and in case with Good Omens, there are 3 of them. Normally do that. But it's good from the point of view of our classes because happens, whichever point, whichever aspect I want to discuss to underpin, I can find a suitable quote in Good Omens and then see what's been done in 3 Russian translations and the Ukrainian one. And of course, I can give them text for their own translation. They can see how hard it actually is to deal with puns, dealing with Britishness of Good Omens. And Britishness in Good Omens is also underpinned by juxtaposition of Britishness with something that is not British. For example, Americans and their mentality. There are also representatives of other countries in the book, but it's mostly, for example, on this slide we can see biscuits, but there's the whole bit in Good Omens in which there's Sister Mary, I hope you remember, who thinks that the guy is American, although he is actually British. So she offers him some biscuits, and she says, "These are biscuits, but you call them cookies." And he is so surprised because he calls them biscuits as well. That's a lovely bit, and this juxtaposition of American and British is right there. But what should translators do about it? They found their different ways of dealing with this. As I can see comments about Marmite. Well, Marmite and Bovril, 2 things that I hope you're prepared for this, that usually disappear in translation. They are gone just like that. So this is a strategy of generalizations. So instead of Marmite, you will get something like bread spread, and instead of Bovril, you will get hot soup. So these are very British things, and what can translators do? They can either keep Marmite or and give a footnote, because nobody knows Marmite. It's not on sale. Only people who've been to UK will be familiar with Marmite. The same about Bovril. Or they can substitute it, thinking that it's not very important thing. You can learn Marmite. And imagine for students, that's a very interesting topic to discuss, the importance of Marmite. And we're talking about Marmite, but what we're really talking about is a debate about the equivalency. It's about adaptation strategies and so on. We are discussing translation issues, but students will think we're discussing Marmite. So it's amazing, and it's a good thing that Terry Pratchett has given us all these things. Well, in this case, Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, of course. Okay, so what are my conclusions? So from my experience, it's very challenging to teach using Terry Pratchett's work. Why? Because as in case, for example, where it says this, students might find it really very hard. And when it's too hard, they don't want to make this effort. Also, they might be unwilling to read long text. In English, they might be generally unwilling to step out of their comfort zone and get acquainted with the genre not really very familiar with. But when they do it, usually they get to love, they get to enjoy it. It's very refreshing, it's different. It's academically stimulating when they're doing the research. And of course, it is fun when they learn how to laugh at Terry Pratchett jokes because, well, I've heard this a number of times, but this joke's not funny. And I ask why. Maybe there is something you don't know. Like, for example, there's a reference to Sound of Music. Have you seen that? No. Okay, here we go. Why don't you go and watch it and we'll talk about these references to the Sound of Music. So the picture that you see right now, it's some art done by my student. So that was a year when I supervised 3 academic papers. One was the one on the group in the left. You can probably recognize the veterinary and the watch characters. So, and the one who is imprisoned, that's my student, the artist, who did this picture. So she did genre games in the Watch series, and another student did her research on Harry Potter, the group in the middle, and on the right, that is David Lodge's book. So even by the fact that the student did this art, you can see different it was for them, how challenging and how rewarding. So I do encourage you all, if you are in a position to teach using Terry Pratchett. We've been talking about quotes a lot, and we've been quoting Terry Pratchett all over the place. So this is my favorite quote. Getting an education was a bit like a communicable sexual disease. It made you unsuitable for a lot of jobs, and then you had the urge to pass it on. Well, here it is. Let's pass it on. Let's, well, carry the torch. And when we are in a position to teach and share, let's do it. It's amazing. Thank you very much for the attention. And I'm sorry about the technical side. Well, you know how it is.
Thanks so much, Olena. I'm just waiting for some questions to come in, and while I wait, I want to just share with you that this time last year, actually, we ran an event where we invited 4 of Pratchett's translators to come to Dublin, and then we interviewed them all about how they translated pyramids, and there were some particular parts that I'd pulled out which I thought would be really difficult. One that springs to mind is where the 2 boys are talking near the very beginning of the book. So you've got Tepik talking to Chida, and Tepik, who is a prince, so he's born into a royal family, and he says, my mother was a concubine. And then Chida says, oh, I thought that was a kind of vegetable. And then like, this is a joke, there's no explanation there. And then I was expecting this to be incredibly difficult to translate into different languages. And we had the French, a Spanish, Hungarian and Polish translator there. And while I can't remember exactly which languages it was, but certainly the French said, oh no, it's fine, we just say something else. So do you find that it was, do you find that any one of the elements, like for example, humor, do you find it's any more difficult to translate than any of the other elements when it comes to Pratchett's work?
Talking about humor, it can be very different. So some humor translates really very well. If we talk about, for example, satire or parody, as long as the reference field is known, it won't be lost, and it's not really difficult to translate. But when it comes to wordplay, well, that is famously hard to translate, and this is the big question: what to do. So in some cases, you're bound to lose some jokes. So what do you do then? Do you try to compensate and insert jokes that you can come up with at different points? For example, Ukrainian translators of Good Omens inserted a joke about Spanish Inquisition at some point with the reference to Monty Python's Spanish Inquisition sketch, which is not in the original. So is this relevant? Is this the procedure that translators should follow? I don't know, but in every case, the translator will make their choice, and they will live with it, and readers will love it and hate it. It's like Marmite, really.
Very true. Yeah, absolutely. Just like a book, really. Like no matter what you do, you can't really hope to please everybody, I don't suppose. So one person's asking, do you use Terry Pratchett's work to teach about English culture, to educate your students about things like Marmite before you actually ask the students to start reading the book?
Well, in my translation, I ask them in the beginning to read the book or watch TV series, but I also straightforward I give them examples. So for the biscuit and cookies example will be in my first class, and then I use them when I need them. It's up to the students whether they've read the book by this time or not. Well, if they've read it, they'll gather much more from the classes, obviously. But it's not like I make them and I test them on whether they've read it or not. It's their education after all. I offer, and it's up to them to take up on their offer.
But you find that they come back to you saying, like, what is this Marmite stuff? Like, do they come back to you, or do they work it out by themselves?
Well, most of them know how to Google. But
Okay.
sometimes, of course, they say, well, I haven't managed to find this and that, and I explain, yes, that happens.
Okay. So someone's asking, what's your approach to translating dialects and accents in Discworld?
Well, I'm not a translator, so fortunately for me, I don't have to deal with this problem. But it's one of those things that are the hardest to translate. What do you do, for example, with Beagles who speak with a Scottish accent? Should we find another accent, dialect in Ukrainian that should represent this? We don't really have anything which would get the same emotional reaction. So I'm not sure how it can be done, but We Free Men has just come out. I will definitely look into how they've dealt with Beagles, and then I will have an opinion about it.
Yeah. It seems like there are three main tactics and one kind of workaround. So one tactic is just ignore the dialect. So like just pretend that it wasn't written in an accent and then just write using standard language. And then obviously you miss something there. Another one, as you say, is to use another dialect that already exists in your country or in your language. But then you can end up with the reader being confused, thinking, well, why do these things look like they're from Scotland, but actually they speak like they're from somewhere completely different? And then the third one is to invent a new dialect which doesn't exist, which can work, but then it can be distracting for the readers. And the workaround actually is just to say, like, hello, he said in X dialect, which, yeah, it's a workaround. It is not perfect. So it will be.
Well, there is no perfect solution, but what you've said about the third approach, this is what they've done in the Russian translation of McFeagles. It's a kind of a strange dialect, but I read it out loud for my daughter, 8-year-old daughter. She enjoyed it immensely. So there will be, yes, a reader for every choice that the translator will make.
Exactly. Sarah asks, were there any translations of Pratchett, I presume she means into Ukrainian or Russian, that you disagreed with in terms of the words that have been used?
Yes, yes, I am a kind of a disagree. I disagree a lot and I criticize a lot. So when it's too much adaptation, for example, Evgenia yesterday, my colleague from Ukraine, gave us examples when some political motives from our Orange Revolution were inserted in that. I don't like this. I don't think they have a place in Terry Pratchett's world, and I don't find it funny. And Ozarks, for example, are substituted with Kaidasheva Semya. That's a reference to Ukrainian literature. In Good Omens, we have Scotch eggs. In Ukrainian translation, that is substituted with chicken Kiev, of all things. My students thought, what? So these are a bunch of guys, children, somewhere in provincial England, and they are discussing this dish? Not really, no. And I agree with them. So I think that a lot should be preserved if possible, especially culturally specific things. I mean, even students who are not really interested maybe in discovering a whole new world, but even they feel that, yes, you learn, you grow richer in your cultural awareness when you learn about Scotch eggs and Marmite.
That's very true. Okay, I seem to have run out of questions. There's a general question, which is how often do translators communicate with the authors about problematic parts? Would you like to address that?
No, I'm not aware of that. Once again, I'm not part of this process, publishing process, right? But yesterday, Evgenia talked about it. She mentioned how at least Ukrainian translators reached out to scholars who deal with these things. And rather than following this flat earth translation from the Russian books, everybody in Russia will think of Discworld as flat world, okay, rather than Discworld because of the translations. And this is another one I strongly disagree with this translation choice. So they listened to the academic community, and now in Ukrainian it's Discosvit, not Discworld. But obviously they can't reach out to the author, unfortunately for us, unless they use the resources of Madame Tracy.
That would be okay. Well, I think we've run out of questions now, so let's take a few minutes break until the next presentation, and I'll say thank you very much to Olena for your very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.